Welcome to Ethics for Legal Investigators, an introductory guide, presented by educatedinvestigator.com. Private investigators and defense attorneys both work in professions that are governed by ethical rules. When a private investigator is working on their own, the professional ethics that guide investigators will be sufficient for their job. However, when an investigator is working for an attorney, they are considered an agent of the attorney. Investigators hired by attorneys are seen as legal and ethical extensions of the attorney, and the attorney can be held responsible for the investigator's actions. Because of this, defense investigators must combine the ethics of private investigation with the ethics of the attorney for whom they're working to create a hybrid set of defense investigator ethics. Now that we've reviewed how the ethical rules apply to defense investigators, let's take a look at a few specific ethical issues. We will be focusing on the 4 issues that seem to be shared by all states' investigators and by all attorney bar associations. We can think of these as the 4 key concepts of defense investigation ethics. They are acting lawfully, confidentiality, conflict of interest, and performing services within your competence. The first key concept for defense investigator ethics is to act lawfully. This should be obvious and easy to follow, but it turns out that breaking the law is the most common form of ethical violation among private investigators. In their attempts to learn information, investigators can easily slip over the line into an illegal activity, especially in cases when the law is unclear or applies differently to law enforcement officers than it does to private citizens. The solution, of course, is to know the law, and especially in areas where investigators tend to run into trouble. So those areas of the law are intimidation, trespassing, impersonating an officer, illegal use of tracking devices, stalking, and tampering with evidence. There is absolutely no point in breaking the law to gather information, and sometimes every investigator needs to tell their client that the information they seek just cannot be located through legal means. The second key concept in defense investigation ethics is confidentiality. Working in the legal profession means that we often learn information that isn't publicly available. If we learn it in a confidential setting, we can't share it without the client's permission. The most common form of this confidentiality is often referred to as the attorney-client privilege. It's kind of like the Las Vegas rule. Whatever happens between an attorney and their client stays between an attorney and their client. If there's a defense investigator working on the defense team, that rule expands to include the defense investigator. So, you have a conversation with your defendant client, they tell you something, it stays with you, you only share it with the defendant and the attorney. The police cannot put you on the stand and force you to testify about that piece of information. But Confidentiality doesn't only refer to the information that you gain directly from your client. The American Bar Association rules state that confidentiality may apply to all information relating to the representation, whatever its source. So, information that you gain by speaking to a witness might also be covered by this confidentiality rule. If you're unsure, the simple solution is not to share. The third key concept of legal investigation ethics is conflict of interest. Conflict of interest is a very common ethic shared by most professions, and it means that you cannot serve two masters at the same time. If you are hired to work on a case, you represent the business or the individual who hired you, and you must align yourself with them. You can't also accept work for the opposing side. You can't look for personal gain. And you can't represent a company if your spouse works for a competing company. All of these situations may force you to decide between competing desires or points of view, making it difficult to keep yourself cleanly aligned with your client. In legal cases, conflict of interest rules exist to protect the person directly involved in the judicial proceedings. As a legal investigator, that person is your client. The client may be the defendant in a murder case, the wife in a divorce, or an entity such as a business in a civil suit. Some of the common ways in which investigators run into conflict of interest ethical issues are if they simultaneously agree to represent two co-defendants in a case, or if they represent an individual and some aspect of that individual's case may have a conflict with a previous client's case. And thirdly, investigators always have to look out for any kind of personal connection. It would be unethical, for example, to take on a case where the individual is alleged to have assaulted a member of your family. The fourth key concept of defense investigation ethics is to perform services within your competence. The primary ethical issue of performing services within your competence is one of consumer protection. The person who hires you, whether it's an individual or a law firm or a government entity, has the right to an honest evaluation of your professional abilities. If we look at other industries, you would want to know if the mechanic working on your Toyota has 20 years of experience on Japanese cars, or if they just finished a class on repairing outboard motors. So, the things to think about are first, do you have training in the job that you're taking? Second, do you have experience? Investigators have to start somewhere. And in states that do not require an investigation apprenticeship, it might be hard to get all the experience you want or need. It might be tempting to stretch the truth or assume that you can fake it until you make it. However, there can be serious consequences to offering your services when you don't really know how to perform those services. Failure to disclose, lack of competence not only means that you're not giving the client the opportunity they need to be involved in an important decision, but it also means that you're probably setting yourself up to fail. So, always be honest. If you don't know how to do something, the client may still be willing to allow you to try, but you need to tell them your accurate level of experience and your accurate level of training for the service you're going to perform. We hope you've enjoyed this video on the 4 key concepts of defense investigation ethics. For more information and more training, please contact us at www.educatedinvestigator.com.